How's it going? I want to tell you a story about something that happened to me a few months back from when I was mixing for someone. Um, it ties directly into this concept that I heard Mike Dean talking about recently, where he was talking about always using the Pro Tools session that's sent to you and always working from that when you're dealing with an artist. In other words, use the effects that they send you when you're making their mix. Don't take the effects off. Don't start from dry tracks. Like, use the session with the effects in it. And so let me respond to how I feel about that. It makes total sense to do that in some circumstances. Number one, they have to be using the same DAW as you are. So if they're using Pro Tools, I'm using Pro Tools. He's working with major artists, Travis Scott, Lana Del Rey, Madonna, Kanye, tons of people, you name it. He's working with top tier artists. They are using top tier producers. They're all using Pro Tools. So for the majority of these people, they're all using Pro Tools sessions that get sent to him. So it makes sense when you're working with top tier artists to work like that. Where it doesn't make sense is when you're working with people who aren't top tier. If they're amateur, if they're intermediate, then it makes absolutely no sense to use what they give you on the tracks as effects. And what I mean is, generally, they're putting stuff on in a way that they don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand the problems they're creating by adding too much of something, too much bass, too much compression, whatever. So using what they give you is not a good idea if you're not on the top tier. All right? It's not like a one size fits all. You have to understand who you're working with. You have to understand what level in your career you're at as a mixer, because that determines usually who you're working with. So if you're not at the top tier pro level, then you're getting stuff from people who aren't top tier, and you have to treat it differently. Let me give you an example. That's where the story comes in. So I was working with somebody not long ago, and they were using some ridiculous DAW, like, any DAW, like a very unknown name DAW, like Mixcraft or something, right? As a result, they couldn't figure out how to take effects off. And I was screen sharing and stuff, and I couldn't even figure it out. I mean, literally, I had all the stuff checked for them, like, to take off all the effects. We bypassed everything in sight. It still did not print without the effects. So as a result, no matter what this guy did, he was always printing his stuff, like he was trying to export wave files. Every single time he would export the vocals, the acoustic guitar, whatever, it was always covered in these effects, reverb, delay, all kinds of stuff. No matter what we did, no matter how many ways we took off everything, it didn't matter. So what I wound up finding out was that this guy was recording to like some other type of like handheld recorder, Zoom recorder or something prior, and then importing the stuff into this Mixcraft program. And then somewhere along the way, this Mixcraft program was absolutely destroying everything and adding all the worst possible, way too much reverb, way too much whatever, delay. It was a bunch of things. The EQ was terrible. Everything it was adding was awful, and we couldn't get it off. So as a result, this is how I figured it out. Before we screen shared, I said, send me everything you have in the session, totally dry and totally wet, because that's my solution to most people. When you're dealing with people that are amateur or intermediate level, like I'm saying, you're not typically going to use the stuff they give you on the tracks. And if you were to ask them to print stems, or print the multi-tracks of everything with nothing on it, dry stuff, you can usually make that work. But if you were to ask them to print everything on it with all your effects on it, let me just work from there, which is something, people mention. Chad Blake, a lot of people will talk about it makes sense to work from where the artist has it, but not if they're amateurs, not if they're intermediate level where they don't quite know what they're doing and they're messing things up, because you cannot unscramble an egg. Once the egg is scrambled, there's no way to unscramble it. And that's what's happening when you put too much compression on. When you put too much reverb on and print it, I can't unscramble your eggs now. All right? So the idea here is you have to print everything twice. You have to print all the multi-tracks with totally dry, no effects, and then you can print them with the effects just in case you did do something that is going to be used in the final. If you did something cool with delay or something, then maybe it could be used. It makes no sense for me to recreate something magical that you did. But if there's nothing magical there, why would I use these effects that are hurting everything? So let's flip back to this story real quick. The first time, before I knew that this mixed craft was the issue, creating all these problems, I basically said, print me everything dry and everything wet. That's what I always say. The guy printed everything twice with all the effects on it twice. So I was like, okay, it's still there. And then I said, please listen to it before you send it to me. In other words, just fly it into iTunes or something and click one of the tracks and just, or just listen to it. Like, how hard is that, right? Listen to the track and make sure there's no effects on it. You can't miss it if there's reverb on it. Like, you can't mistake it if the thing is covered in a cathedral hall or something. And then you listen, you'll be able to tell. So I said, listen to it before you send it to me, please. But do me a favor, print it again. This time, tell me what it's saying. Okay, check that, blah, blah, blah. I told him which boxes to check, what to take off. I was like, that should work. He did it again. He sent it to me again. I said, did you listen to this? It's still there. So the guy's like, yeah, but I checked all the boxes, but, it's still there. There's nothing I can do. So that's when I basically had him send me all these screenshots of his screen and and I was like, okay, once you've checked these, try that. So he did that. And again, it came the exact same way. But at that point, it's like we were beating a dead horse. I literally thought to myself, I'm like, there's nothing I can do if this guy, if this is all he has and all he can do. Maybe I thought these effects, these tracks that were printed from another source, like the Zoom recorders, like maybe it was printed with all these effects. Like, maybe he ran his vocals through an effects pedal with reverb on it or something. Like, you try to come up with how is it possible for this thing to, you take off all the effects, it's still there. So my answer was they must have been there before he put it in there into his DAW. It must have been on it. And he recorded it that way with some crazy, line 6 POG effect or something, making everything sound like trash. And that way, if he did that, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do after in the DAW to remove effects. You could remove everything you put on in there, but if it went in that way, you're still screwed. So I was like, okay, there's obviously nothing we could do. Like, I resigned to that after the third time, or fourth. I think it was a third, though, of telling the guy how to take everything off, and you got to take everything off, and again, I don't use Mixcraft, so I don't even know what's going on. I'm just learning as I go how to figure out how to take this stuff off based on what the menus say and what the screen says and my knowledge of Pro Tools and, a little work in Ableton and all this stuff. I've used a bunch of DAWs. So the idea here is I basically said, all right, screw it. I'm just going to mix what he gave me. Now, the result of this wasn't good because when I gave him the mix of what he gave me, he didn't like it. And no shit, I didn't like it either. But I told the guy, look, you don't like it because there's nothing I can do. I'm trying to make this as good as I can based on what you gave me, but there's inherent problems. The vocal is way too covered in reverb, and I can't get rid of all of it, so your vocal's always going to not sound clear, not sound present, always sound way messed up. And the same thing with the guitars, the same thing with everything he gave me. So he was upset with me for working on it. He's like, he couldn't understand. He's like, why would you work on it if it was going to be blah, 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 not good? And my response was, what did you want me to do? How many more times did you want me to have to walk you through how to get stuff that's still not right? Like, how much more hand-holding could you possibly have needed to get this right? So at the end of the day, he just wanted his song to sound great, and I wanted him to be able to take the effects off so that I could deliver that. But if he's not able to hold up his end by taking the effects off, then what he has can only get so much better. Only whatever a little bit could be done is it. you're really making the ceiling on what can be done, like, not high at all. So all that happened here was then, out of nowhere, that's when he discloses finally that he recorded everything on a Zoom recorder first before importing it into Mixcraft. In other words, I didn't know that. All I knew was he's using Mixcraft, he's taken the effects off, and there's still effects on. So finally, he discloses the information that he recorded on a Zoom thing first. So I said to the guy, let me hear the Zoom thing. Let me hear those recordings. Like, just play those back, not what you imported into the Mixcraft. So he plays the Zoom recorder thing, and I said, I can hear through the phone. There's no reverb on that. I can hear it's dry. Now play the Mixcraft. He's playing it. I said, do you hear that? I can hear through the phone that it's covered in reverb. Don't you hear the difference? And he's like, yeah, oh no, I do hear the difference. It's just a little reverb on the whatever. I'm like, a little reverb? What are you talking about? The room you're in must be so bad. The sound is so bad in there that you think that's a little reverb. Like, I can't even imagine how that's possible. But through the phone, I can clearly hear there's reverb. I said, just listen to that. Listen how much reverb there is. You hear when the vocal stops, it doesn't stop. What is all that? And then listen to the Zoom. It's not there. So he wound up giving me the stuff from the Zoom recorder, and using that, I was able to create something that sounded like music finally, instead of whatever gobbledygook had to happen from the effects that he had on there somehow, unbeknownst to both of us, somehow, some way, a bunch of effects that could never be removed that are inherently printing on everything in Mixcraft. Like, what? I don't know, but I don't care, because I don't use Mixcraft, and these are reasons, right? I use Pro Tools. But these kind of things, like, this is to illustrate a point that all that matters to the client, to the artist, all that matters is that it sounds good. That's it. So if you have to tell the person 6, 7, 8, 9 times, what I learned is, don't ever work on something that you know you can't make good. In other words, there's like a limit to what you should be willing to work on. You should always make sure that what you're working on is something you can make good. If you cannot make it sound good, do not work on it. This is like the best advice that took me so long. I didn't learn it until even a few months ago. Because at the end of it, they're always going to blame you. In other words, no matter what you do and make it sound as good as you can, if you know in your head that you've got these limitations because of what they gave you, and it's always going to be messed up, don't take the money, don't work on it, because afterwards, at the end of the day, this is always going to be something they're not happy with, and it's your fault. And that makes no sense, because they messed it up. You only are doing what you can do with what they gave you. And if they're not able to give you what you need, sorry, cannot work on this. I apologize, move on. But I've made mistakes of working on stuff, because sometimes people say their computer went down. They no longer have the files. One time I had a guy who it's unfortunate. He told me the guy in the band died, so they can't record it again, but like, what can I do? I feel for people in these situations. You wind up saying to yourself, oh, all right, well, if this is all you have, I'll work on it, because, I understand your situation, and, if no one else is willing to work on it for you to make it even a little bit better, I'll work on it. That kind of thing. Like, you think you're doing a good thing. You think you're doing a service by being like, oh, you don't have anything else? I'll work on it. But if they can get the stuff, even if it's not now, like if the computer's dead, but it could come back to life, why don't you see if it can come back to life. Once you tell me the computer's dead for good, we can have another conversation. But if it's like, it's in the shop or something, wait till it's back to normal. Don't work on it until then. Because at the end of the day, it's like your work is always going to be it has your name on it. If you mixed it, it has your name on it. So if it sounds wacky, that artist is going to forget that their computer was busted, that they never had the stems, they didn't have the multi-tracks, they only had this version, and they wanted you to make gold out of it, or whatever. They're going to forget that all the tracks had to be printed with this on it because they were recorded with it on it and it was a mistake. They're going to forget all that. All they're going to remember is, I paid this guy, this is what he gave me. Now, that's the exact, like, if you were them, you would remind them, but you're not there to remind them. And there can't be an apology note with every mix you send out. It's not how it works. So, because it's your business card that you're sending out, because they may play that for other people who may say this doesn't sound good, and then they're going to say, who mixed it? It was this guy. They're going to leave out the part that they screwed up, that they didn't have the files, that they couldn't take the effects off. That all gets left out. All that happens is your name doesn't sound good. That's what whoever later hears it, like, in other words, they go to another studio, another producer to make their stuff sound good. No one's given them the whole story I just gave you. They just get the end. So I've learned this the hard way, and I'm trying to give it to you guys so that you guys don't have to go through all this. But it's frustrating, to say the least, that, you know, you're with the best intentions trying to give somebody the best work you can possibly give them, but you could still wind up hurting your name and tarnishing what you can really do by working on stuff that cannot be fixed. So all work isn't really work you should be working on. All right. You got to take that out of this video, if nothing else. I don't want to rant too long, but, you know, I think it was necessary. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button. More videos to come. You don't want to miss them. So subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It really helps the channel. And have notification turned on so you don't miss anything. And if you have mixing and mastering questions or you need private lessons, we offer that through ScreenShare. Check out our website. Also, we have a special offer at the moment for mixing and mastering. If you have a song that you're trying to improve the quality of, either in mixing or mastering or both, let us know. My name's Evan Jaffe. Everything's in the description. Custom Cut Studios. Take it easy.